Oil costs next to nothing. There's no money for the war. Putin is furious about the new sanctions. Orbán is rebelling. Hungary has said goodbye to the EU. Trump's secret correspondence has been revealed. Shocking content is blowing up the internet. Watch the explosive details in the following report.
Have the toughest sanctions against Russia really come into effect? The EU has approved its 18th package of sanctions. For the first time in history, the restrictions include lowering the price cap on Russian oil to $47.6 per barrel. But that's not all.
The introduction of the 18th package is being associated by many experts and economists in some way with very tough measures against Russia. But I think at this point it's too early to jump to conclusions about its effectiveness. Indeed, the price cap, the lowering of the price cap on Russian oil and the blow to Russia's shadow fleet are the two main aspects present in this package. And in principle, they look like potentially quite painful blows to Russia and its economy in the long run.
For the first time, the sanctions package addresses the flag registry and Rosneft's largest oil refinery in India.
We are increasing pressure on the Russian military industry, on Chinese banks that enable sanctions evasion, and we are blocking the export of technologies used in drones.
Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán stated that the country may leave the European Union if membership ceases to be beneficial. According to him, the EU is increasingly turning from an economic union into a political one. For now, Orbán added, Budapest intends to remain within the union and strive for change.
Well, that's pure absurdity, considering that his country's economy is subsidized. And today, a large number of processes in the social sphere, infrastructure, and many other areas in Hungary itself are completely dependent on Brussels. Therefore, a real exit from the Union would not just be shooting oneself in the foot, but shooting oneself in the head for Orbán's Hungary. Therefore, this statement should be viewed solely as an attempt on his part to manipulate.
Meanwhile, the US State Department stated that Trump will aggressively pursue his intentions and make firm decisions to end Russia's war against Ukraine. He is profoundly dissatisfied with the current situation, as Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has officially announced that the strategic deployment of robust deterrence forces to Ukraine is now almost entirely ready and prepared for immediate action.
I am satisfied with how the work is progressing, and other coalition members are also ready. These plans have now been worked out as much as possible before the ceasefire comes into effect. That is why last week we held a meeting of the coalition of the willing to approve these plans.
According to him, several months ago, military planners from coalition countries developed plans to assist Ukraine in 4 areas: in the airspace, at sea, on land, and in strengthening the combat capability of the armed forces of Ukraine. But aren't they rushing things?
At this point, I would view it with nothing but skepticism. And in principle, yes, even amid this significant revival of political leadership in Europe, both Starmer, Macron, and Merz still largely lack the agency and ability to make decisions without Washington's approval.
The Trump scandal. The Wall Street Journal published an article claiming that the US president may have sent an obscene letter to Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire convicted of sex crimes against minors. Trump himself denies this.
Regarding Trump himself, a huge number of various interested parties, both within the US and abroad, are searching for a lot of compromising material on Trump because it exists, and they see it as an opportunity to put pressure on the White House.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has once again shelled a city in southwestern Syria. An internal intertribal conflict has erupted within the country, and Israel has decided to intervene.
After the regime of Bashar al-Assad was overthrown in Syria and the new authorities took their positions, there was an agreement between Tel Aviv and representatives of the new Syrian government that a demilitarized zone would be established on the border between the two countries. For a year now, nothing significant has happened. Syria did not withdraw its troops, nor did it pull back its weapons. And the strike on the general staff was essentially Israel's final warning to them.
On the 16th of July, the Israel Defense Forces attacked the Syrian capital, Damascus. The strike targeted the buildings of the Syrian General Staff and the Presidential Palace. The same situation applies to the Ministry of Defense building.
Putin has lost everything. Russia doesn't have a single kopeck left. The economy is in flames. Factories are shutting down. Mines have stopped. Oil is out of the game. They're taking the last pennies from Russians to pay for tanks. Russia is clearly in an economic coma. It won't last much longer.
And now the harshest austerity measures have begun in Russia.
As for the alleged murder of the Russian economy, as a truly famous and widely recognized writer once eloquently said, the persistent rumors of my untimely death are, in fact, greatly exaggerated, right? Well, it's the same thing in this case.
The Speaker of the Federation Council, Valentina Matvienko, has called on people to prepare for a very difficult period regarding the budget's expenditure side.
Regarding the statement by Valentina Ivanovna Matvienko, who was born in the Yanetsk region, just a small biographical detail about Putin's associate, she is absolutely right. Moreover, despite the fact that she has a reputation for not being, let's say, the most knowledgeable person in economics, it was Valentina Matvienko who made the well-known statement that Russia doesn't even produce nails. And this was to emphasize that there are real problems in the country's economy, and while people try to ignore them, they do exist.
Well, it seems that the money is running out, not for the people, but for the system itself.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Key budget indicators. The year 2025, first half, the budget deficit is 3.7 trillion rubles. The planned deficit for 2025 at the beginning was set at 1.3 trillion. Some Russian economists are already saying that by the end of this year, Russia's budget deficit will reach 8 trillion rubles. To make it easier to calculate, that's 56 billion US dollars.
Revenues are falling, expenses are rising, especially for the war. For several months now, the Ministry of Finance has been transferring funds from various reserves to cover holes in the budget. In other words, we're cutting everything we can just to have enough for tanks.
Moreover, when there are no investments, it means that if there are machines producing weapons and those machines break down, there's nothing to replace them with. Investments are needed for that, but there are not. So it turns out that you won't even be able to produce military equipment anymore. In fact, this is already happening to some extent. There are reports that enterprises in Russia's military-industrial complex are shutting down for one simple reason. The directors of these companies say that they receive directives from above about what to produce and at what price to sell. In order to sell at those prices, we have to operate at a loss.
Even the sacred national projects are under threat. Anatoly Artamonov stated outright, some of them can be postponed. For example, the Army 2025 project, which was supposed to be the flagship of Russian military modernization, was officially shut down this year. They say now is not the time for that.
And more people in Russian opposition figures, but those very close to the authorities are starting to say, listen, we can't afford such war expenses. Well, the Institute for the Study of Warfare, it's a Western publication, they say that Russia can no longer simultaneously manage its economy and wage war. In other words, there isn't enough money for either one.
At the same time, the budget's priorities will still remain not ensuring the standard of living for Russians, but meeting the needs of the security agencies and funding the war against Ukraine. Now that's truly in the Kremlin style.
Already, as of mid-2025, the agricultural machinery industry is facing layoffs and problems, and the coal industry is experiencing absolutely nightmarish issues. Here we have Kuzbas, Russia's leading coal mining region. They're saying, well, we might have to close the mines. In other words, the foundation of the region's economy is the mines, and we're going to shut them down. That means an entire region is being lost. And as for the construction industry, by the end of 2024, only 31% of all housing built in Russia was actually sold.
And most importantly, oil no longer saves us like it used to.
And our oil will be restricted. Well, at least they'll try to restrict it somehow, even though they won't really succeed. It's simply not possible at this point in time. the volume of oil and petroleum products consumed worldwide is increasing because the global economy itself is growing. There's no getting away from that. Volumes are rising.
I don't know what's growing for others, but the Russian budget has been missing out on oil export revenues for several months now. And next year they're forecasting another drop in prices.
In Russia, there will be problems with storage. And it turns out that oil and gas companies are also facing issues with production. Globally, the decline continues and OPEC sees this. And we see that, for example, starting from the 1st of August, oil production will be increased by 511,000 barrels per day. This is a plan allowing countries to increase oil production. So naturally, more oil means a lower price for it. And as a result, Russia is already significantly under-receiving revenue from the oil and gas sector. This is the main sector of its economy. And there aren't really any promising prospects here.
But now the Federation Council faces a different task finding additional sources of income. And they've decided to start by revising benefits for Russians, which, by the way, make up a third of the entire federal budget.
Roughly speaking, utility payments will go up and other types of payments will start to appear. They'll come up with all sorts of new charges. Discounted fares for beneficiaries will be cut, and other opportunities that allow people to avoid paying for something one way or another will be fewer and fewer of those. In other words, this will be a clearly antisocial agenda where everything that citizens currently get at, let's say, more affordable prices, even for free, all of that will be abolished.
So a new stage is beginning in Russia. The everyone to the front mode. Everything else comes later. But that later may never come if the economy continues to be strangled by war and reckless ventures. For now, Russians are being told to tighten their belts. Yet again.
That's all for now. Catch more breaking news from the front in our next episode.